it's a bad look for the Cubs to say, like, we need to be more like the Brewers. It's just a bad look. They know that, but it's not something that has changed. Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with Patrick Mooney. We're your Cubs beat writers over at The Athletic. And Patrick, not that it was in any doubt, but the Cubs are officially eliminated from not playoff contention, but the division, as the Brewers have clinched the division. Milwaukee Brewers are NL Central champs. I believe this is their sixth playoff appearance in the last 7 years for an organization that just didn't make the playoffs very much before that. This isn't too dissimilar to the Cubs' little run from 15 to 18, 19. They're 18, I guess, where they were making the playoffs a ton and they just never did that. But this is a completely different organization, right? That now the Cubs are striving to become like the Milwaukee Brewers. I don't like it feels odd to say that, but that is the reality that the Cubs are faced with, and the Milwaukee Brewers are division champs. I think it's something that Jed Hoyer, Carter Hawkins, Tom Ricketts, everyone needs to grapple with and figure out how this happened and how the Cubs can get back to the top of this division.
Yeah, and we can go over some of the history and the developments that led up to this, but I think just to take a second and be like, we write about the Cubs all the time. We talk about the Cubs all the time. When was the last time we even mentioned the division deficit? I mean, that's just how much the degree to which the Brewers ran away with this division. I feel like it had been conceded from a Cubs perspective a long time ago, and that really our focus in terms of conveying what's going on to our readers and listeners was all about just that last wild card spot, which is just kind of an amazing lowering of expectations at Wrigley Field. The fact that the Brewers just jumped out so far ahead, and the Cubs and Brewers wrapped up their season series relatively early, especially after all the turnover that's happened in Milwaukee. For the Cubs to just get lapped like this should be just an enormous wake-up call that whatever the Cubs are doing, it is not good enough.
Yeah, I look at these teams, and I've said this for 7-8 years. I don't see like this glaring difference in talent. And every year, for the most part, they seem to maximize the talent in Milwaukee, and they're unable to do so. Or, they just get what the computer spits out and says this team is expected to be. That's what has kind of happened the last couple of years for the Cubs. I think that's something that we'll dive into in the offseason, I think, and have to press Jed on is how do you get this team to project to be better, not project to be one thing and hope that you extract 4, 5, 6, 7 extra wins. They need to project to be a better team because they're projecting to be the team that they have been the past couple of years. And that's not it. Obviously, it's not good enough when you're falling short of the playoffs. Milwaukee seems to, I don't think the goal should be exactly what Milwaukee does, which is their projections probably have them at like 85 wins or something like that. And then they win 90 something games. I'm not sure if you're the white Chicago Cubs, I don't think your goal should be to outwin your lower projections, right? If your goal, always your goal should be to win more than the projections say, but your projections should be much better than what the Cubs say. Cubs are. It's just sometimes mind-boggling to kind of to understand how baseball works, right? Like some of this stuff is so random, and some of this stuff is hard to fully appreciate and explain. But whatever the Brewers are doing, the Cubs need to catch up. I do think there are some things that are going on behind the scenes that aren't fully appreciated. The Brewers like to keep things under wraps. They're not the type of organization that goes around boasting about what they do. They just do things really well. And so it's hard to get detailed information about what they do and what they're doing well. But clearly, it's a well-run organization from top to bottom. And when I say that, I mean like it's not just the Brewers there's a lot of talk of Baltimore, right? Well, the Baltimore excels at developing position player talent. That's what you can quickly go to that. If I had to pick one thing with the Brewers, it's identifying relief pitching talent. That's where they really stand out to me. But then you go up and down, and they're doing a good job. They nail trades. William Contreras is a good trade. You can talk about Jackson Churio, developing him. They've done a much better job of late of developing younger talent. That used to be something that they struggled with, but now they're starting to consistently produce players from their minor league system. So it's pro scouting, it's R&D, it's international scouting, it's amateur scouting. They seem to be doing a lot of that well right now. So like I said, just a good organization overall.
Yeah, and I feel like we've gone through this year after year after year of the Brewers are done. The Brewers, they can't put together, and they always outperform. And you may be able to help me answer this, Sahadev, but I was looking at Baseball Reference's amazing website on there all the time. And this kind of gets to this idea of like on paper and projection systems that Willy Adames on Baseball Reference is down for 3.1 WAR. Now, this is a shortstop who's played 152 games with 32 homers, 109 RBIs. Michael Busch for the Cubs has 3.1 WAR in like hundreds of at-bats less. And he's having a nice season. 20 homers, 64 RBIs, and a lower OPS at a less valuable position. And to me, I'm just like trying to figure out how that happens. And it's just like kind of one example of like, you kind of have to watch the Brewers and follow them closely, I think, to like appreciate like how good they are. Like if we hadn't spent so many nights up in Milwaukee and kind of seen the arc of that team, I think there would be pretty easy to dismiss. And they're not like the kind of projection system darlings, but they've got guys who play every day, like dynamic two-way foundational players. They've got a nice wave of young players coming up. Their pitching development, I mean, that pitching staff has several ex-Cubs who, for whatever reason, didn't work out in Chicago, but they've, kind of found their groove here. And look, Pat Murphy, I don't think anyone several years ago was like, oh, this guy is the next great manager, right? He was kind of Counsell's buddy, Counsell's old college coach, kind of an old school, gruff, sarcastic, bad cop to Counsell's detached demeanor. And clearly he's got that team, playing, I don't know if it's above their heads, but just at a really high level that I don't think anyone outside Milwaukee expected.
We get it. Mornings are nuts. No time for breakfast, but you need to get your day started right.
What if a delicious, nutritious meal could be ready in seconds? Support for Foul Territory is brought to you by Huel, the world's #1 complete nutrition brand. With over 400 million meals sold worldwide, Huel is trusted by millions of people looking to fuel their days with convenient, complete nutrition. Try it for yourself with this exclusive FT offer. 15% off with the code FOUL at Huel.com.
You know we're all about saving time, but we get hangry, like a lot. I recently fell in love with the Huel Ultimate Super Greens Powder, which is a perfect blend of 91 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients. I also love their complete nutrition bars, and those hot and savory pouches are fire too.
FT fam, give it a shot. Get 15% off with the code FOUL at HUEL.com. Unlock a healthier, easier way to eat with Huel. Nutritionally complete meals in minutes so you can focus on what really matters.
Yeah, no, I mean, he deserves a ton of credit for keeping things together. all the things that they lost in the offseason, Corbin Burns, Craig Counsell, Brandon Woodruff, mid-season Christian Yelich going down, Devin Williams not being with the team to open the season. I'm probably missing one or two things there, but just incredible. You kind of touched on it there, but like Willy Adames versus Michael Busch, right? So I'm looking at their offense. Okay. Christian Yelich, standout performer for 73 games. Awesome. MVP type performance offensively. Okay. But then you look up and down their lineup, and I'm looking at weighted runs created plus. Okay. William Contreras, 132. How are the Cubs going to match that? Say Suzuki, weighted runs created plus, 134. Okay. So similar offensive players. Ian Happ has a better weighted runs created plus than Willy Adames. Michael Busch has the same. So that should equal like Jackson Chourio, who has a 120. Like they have these guys. And then you have Cody Bellinger. Mike Tauchman has the same offensive production as Joey Ortiz, right? So like offensively, when you talk about this, they have these guys that are producing in a similar fashion. It is around the margins. My guess is you break down month by month. The Brewers don't have this dreadful month of where they didn't hit with runners in scoring position, or they just didn't hit. When I talk about the overall numbers, Jackson Chourio has been playing like a superstar for the past month and a half, right? Now, you could say, well, Pete Crow Armstrong has been playing at a similarly high level. Sure, okay, that has happened. The Cubs are getting good performances out of players. A lot of it is like when it's happening, how it's happening, situationally. So it's not like, I think a concept that I'm curious about when it comes to what Jed Hoyer thinks, what Craig Counsell thinks, what the players think is, are the Brewers really right now? They're 11 games ahead of the Cubs. Are they double digits better than the Cubs? In my mind, if any of them believes they're that far ahead, I'd be shocked. Right. And I don't think they're that far ahead, but I do think something like, I don't care if it's 1 game or 11 games. They are better than the Cubs. They're doing things better than the Cubs. No doubt. Yeah. You know, so I don't want it to seem like it's impossible for the Cubs to catch them next year. I think that would be, looking at the standings right now, it would make it feel like it is. It's really hard to make up 10 plus games, right? If you're looking at it like strictly in that fashion. I just don't think you can look at it strictly in that fashion. I think that when we talk about how far away the Cubs are, I think one of the big things you have to keep in mind is, and I think this is why I keep harping on the idea of closing that margin for error, when little things, they're not little things, but things like hitting with runners in scoring position, the bullpen not having a down 6 weeks or whatever it is, offense suddenly cratering, all guys struggling at once. There has to be a way to make up for that. When I brought up Christian Yelich, he was there for 73 games. He was a superstar for 50 of those games. Okay. Jackson Chourio has been a superstar for the last 30-ish games. Willy Adames was a superstar for 50 games, right? William Contreras, like they had guys picking up the slack at different times of the season, while the Cubs had a lot of guys get hot for a month and a half, and it happened to happen at like the same time, like August-ish, right? When they had that great month. And they didn't. I don't know what that says and what that means. That's what I think Jed and Carter need to figure out, right? Like what the Brewers, there's something, there's a little randomness involved here with what I'm talking about, because these guys stepped up at different times, right? But that's how it worked. Like they had different guys stepping up at different times. Is Willy Adames an MVP player? No, he's not. But is he a really good, consistent player? Yes. Did he play like an MVP for probably like a month and a half of the season? Yes. So like those types of things were happening, and they happened spread out enough with different players that it really worked for their offense. What didn't dip, and I saw this really interesting chart of like teams that how teams got to where they are, like win probability added, which between bullpen, starting pitching, and offense, the Brewers, like majority of it, who added the most win probability to their season was their bullpen.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that the Cubs, and now I don't think the Brewers spend a lot of money there. They don't, but they've nailed it year after year after year. They continue to nail the talent there. I think that's something that stood out to me. Like, wow, they're getting there because their bullpen didn't have like a down multiple weeks. I'm sure they had bad games, but they didn't struggle very much over the course of the season. There weren't down moments, and that allowed them to really thrive because the rest of their group was like, starting pitching was below average and the offense was above average and the bullpen was standout. That's an interesting recipe for success, in my opinion, especially when you think about how Jed Hoyer, his philosophy with building a team. He's not going to say like, well, we have to have this stout bullpen. That's number one. You know, he'd never say that. And I'm not sure if I disagree with him saying that.
Well, yeah, I mean, clearly there's a difference between like just collecting bodies and throwing stuff against the wall and like recognizing talent and what is more sustainable than not. And look, the Cubs have a lot of success stories with this. And I think like if you're looking at a guy like McGill or Hudson, like it maybe just wasn't going to happen with the Cubs. Sometimes it's just like timing, where a player is at, like kind of personally, professionally, like are they ready to accept certain changes? Like are they in that place mentally and physically where they can follow through and execute on all these suggestions? But it just seems to me like the Brewers are going to be a problem. Like I think we all thought like, David Stearns, took his kind of sabbatical year, then went to New York. Craig Counsell leaves, they trade Corbin Burns. Like, okay, Brewers like check back in like 4 years, right? And I don't know. I mean, just looking at their kind of roster depth chart, their financial books, like Yelich, hopefully he's good to go, but he's had a serious back issue for a while now, but he's certainly been that MVP type caliber guy you're talking about. Churio, Frelick, Garrett Mitchell, talk about a guy that the Cubs were on in that 2020 draft class and had some good reports on, and ultimately passed on him and picked Ed Howard. And Mitchell kind of just like steps in and already has like a 2-WAR season in like 60 games. Now that doesn't mean he does it over 162, but yet another young guy that they can build around. You've got William Contreras. I mean, he won't enter the ARB system until next year. Now he's probably not a perfect defensive catcher, right? I mean, if he's anything like his brother, there's probably some give and take there, but you did all the reporting, the legwork on how the Cubs were searching for catching help at the trade deadline. Like, how rare is that to have just a middle of the order hitter who's also a passable catcher and like a huge energetic force on the field and in your clubhouse? And look, I don't know if Pat Murphy's kind of routine is going to work every single year or over the long term, but clearly that there's been some sort of like buy-in there. There was kind of this show of unity for Murphy's press conference where all these coaches who did not leave for Chicago with Counsell, where they were there in the auditorium. Adames will be a free agent. I got to think he's looking at Dansby Swanson's contract of like, I'm as good or much better than him. So they'll certainly have to retool and, kind of reallocate resources, but like they're not a team that gives up. Their ownership group and kind of their business model. I mean, you've seen those parking lots, right, Sahadev? Like when we're when we're coming back up to the press box during games or after games, you just see the trail of headlights kind of coming in and out there. Like, people up there love their Brewers. They love tailgating. It's a really nice stadium and ballpark experience, and like they'll draw close to 3 million. Like they've got a good business up there, especially when they're shaking down Wisconsin taxpayers for the fund to renovate their stadium and keep it going. But like overall, like it's an operation that's going to keep trying and is going to be, not just a pest, but like a team that the Cubs are chasing.
Yeah, I am curious to see how their offseason goes. They're like Adames isn't coming back, right? Like he's going to go get the money.
No,
yeah. And so that's a significant that's going to be a significant change. They probably have someone that's ready to move to shortstop that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. I don't know if Bryce Terang's a capable shortstop or what. But knowing that team, knowing that organization, that they'll be ready to fill that spot, and they are going to come with a very competitive team next season. Like, no
I think
doubt
Joey Ortiz may have some shortstop.
Okay,
and his background, the guy they got in the Burns trade. So you're
right.
They got options,
right? And they probably had that in the back of their mind. Like, we're gonna lose Adames. This trade helps us for 2024 and beyond. So that makes a ton of sense. We'll see how they do that. I just, you write this team off, and you're making a mistake. And I'm sure we were not alone, or at least I was not alone when I said, oh, the Brewers are going to struggle this year after all the moves they made in the offseason, or the lack of moves, I guess, that happened. I just don't. What bothers me about how we look at this now is, it's just bad. It's a bad look for the Cubs to say, like, we need to be more like the Brewers. It's just a bad look.
For
and
sure.
That they know that, but it's not something that has changed. Like, think about this, Patrick. We've talked about this. You and I, we've talked about it with Theo Epstein. We've talked about it with Jed Hoyer. They've looked at the Brewers longingly with how they maximize their talent, right? And they thought they had reasons why, but I don't think they fully understood why, how they were doing it, right? They the problem was the manager at one point, and they went and got David Ross, and now they have Craig Counsell, the guy that was doing it in Milwaukee. The problems aren't fixed, not yet. Like, we aren't seeing it on the field, so there's more work to be done.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you how far it goes back. I mean, I distinctly remember after Tom Ricketts fired Jim Hendry, or I should say, once that secret decision became public. And I remember hearing about how internally with the Cubs, there was this kind of like, how do the Brewers do this? Because that year, they advanced to the NLCS. They won 96 games. Like, it's and obviously they did recede a little bit after that, and it wasn't like, they were a team like the Rays, where you just kind of viewed as this like cutting edge, secretive operation. Just like they're just like good at what they did. I'm gonna talk like Counsell here. Like, they know what they're good at. They're good at, and what they're good at, they're really good at. He just has all those sort of like sayings of, just kind of an awareness and the aptitude to kind of just keep going and knowing your identity and not kind of chasing certain trends of just like, this is our philosophy, these are our values, and really sort of sticking to that. And, I'm with you on I think it's appropriate, particularly with Counsell leaving Milwaukee. Like, we have to address this and analyze this. It's interesting. But like, if the Cubs, go into this offseason and be like, oh, we got to be like the Brewers, like that's that's a joke. Like if they want to be like the Brewers, then they can like, you know, slash their ticket prices or something like that. Like they should, you know, want to be like the Dodgers, the Braves, you know, just teams like that. And I think that's where some of the internal confusion is of kind of like what exactly do they want to be. That's certainly on the outside of fans wondering like where is this going. And you're right. Like I think part of this, you know, end of season, you know, debrief and download that we're doing, like you want to point fingers or, you know, you can point out certain deficiencies with the roster, but like the Cubs have a lot of good players. Like, and we'll get into this in future episodes. Like the problem isn't Ian Happ, who's having like a 4-WAR season, has, you know, embodies a lot of what do, who's shown significant improvement over the years and found a great sense of routine and consistency. Like we'll get into, you know, do they trade Nico Horner or whatever? It's like, these are like solidly above average, good major league players who represent your organization well, who fit in the clubhouse really well. It's not like you're not looking to like blow all that up, but you do have to kind of get outside that comfort zone, I think, and take on some more risks, certainly on the financial side, and I think show a little more aggressiveness and conviction in a way that I do think the Brewers have shown. Like you can disagree with, you know, the Burns decision, but like they know their plan and they're going to get rid of that guy a year before he hits free agency. They replenish, they see who they think is a future star and they give him a huge deal and they kind of push him up to Milwaukee in the center fielder. And so they draft pretty well without drafting at the top of the draft. We've joked about their pitch lab. They don't have a literal sign up there with a red arrow saying pitch lab in progress. Or, you know, we don't know that for a fact. We don't go over to Brewers training camp that much, but definitely a team that I think it's important to study, but not emulate.
Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, I think you said it well, but the Cubs need to be like the Dodgers. And I mean, shoot, like the Mets. The Mets had a mess of a season last year, spending and reset so quickly and did a good job. It looked like it was a disaster early on the season, but they bounced back. And some of that, you know, I need to dig into that more. And there's interesting parts about that, like not giving up on young prospects like Mark Vientos, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like stuff like that. A guy that looked lost and terrible. It's a reminder for all fans. Like, just remember, look at how bad Mark Vientos looked, and now he's a huge part of that. But also, they went and made the bold trade for the superstar in Francisco Lindor. And as much criticism as Lindor sometimes gets, he's a difference maker there. He's up for MVP. But it's also like they're a fun team, and it's a very entertaining brand of baseball that they're playing. Through injuries, through issues, whatever's going on, they seem to step up, and that's some of that is the randomness of baseball. I think that I started this with, and I think that makes it more fun. And the Cubs could certainly have that go their way some year, and it probably did in the past, but it isn't right now. So it makes it seem all doom and gloom. But I think you're right when you say, like, hey, there are good players here. Like Ian Happ takes so much criticism, and he's 27th in WAR, I believe, according to Fangraphs in baseball.
Yeah. Good player.
Right behind. Here are the three players, which margin for error is like, so he has 3.9 WAR according to Fangraphs. Rafael Devers 4.1, Corbin Carroll 4.0, Freddie Freeman 4.0. Okay, like WAR isn't perfect, but if you're in the same category of those guys, like, you're a really good player. Like they have talent, and I'm not like there's others like Ian Happ, right? Seiya Suzuki is a really good player. Peter Armstrong has turned himself into a really good player. We could name every single player, you know, pretty much, and be like, these are good building blocks at minimum. So now it's up to Jed Hoyer and company to figure out how to close that gap and take that extra step and make sure a year from now we're not talking about the same things of how are the Brewers doing this and the Cubs can't, right? Because that's I think because a year from now, if we are having this conversation, we're also having the conversation about a new front office that they're going to have to hire, because changes will be coming. Like that, it just cannot happen. All right, Patrick, let's wrap it up there. That's enough Brewers talk.
Enough
for
Wisconsin territory talk.
Yeah. I think fans are sick of it already. Hey, I'll say this. I guess at least it's not the Cardinals, right? Cubs fans. Although they're tied now with the Cubs as we record this in the division. I think Cubs fans just want to finish ahead of the Cardinals, and that's the lone goal for them right now. But obviously higher aspirations this offseason and beyond, and we'll be tackling all that in the episodes to come. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review to Northside Territory. Subscribe to The Athletic. Subscribe to the Northside Territory YouTube channel, please. That helps us a ton. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. We'll be back at you with a mailbag episode soon. Take care.